Good morning and welcome to our first installment of 10th grade history, 10th grade world history. I got to focus in on the camera being over there. But going to be doing some lectures every day, going to be dropping a video for you guys. I feel like GSTV, Grant Seiler, but I feel like that a little bit. But I've been dropping a video every day for you for a lecture. All right, so basically my goal here is to keep this as much as normal as possible. We're going to lecture every day, have assignments every day, current events every Friday. Don't you forget about that. The week that was, we will still keep that up as well. We'll not neglect our necessities, all right? The bare necessities of life, as Jungle Book said. And they're going to make sure we keep it as normal as possible, keep it as real, right? Keep it 100, as you guys say. I know you guys are laughing at me like stupid, but that's fine, whatever. Jumping right into it. All right, chapter 16 is where we're at. If you remember, I know it's been many, many moons ago when we last had class. We actually finished on a test. And jumping into a new chapter, chapter 16 is where we're jumping into. We're at page 339. So actually, if you want to follow along with the video, you certainly can. All right, if you want to go and look at other stuff while I'm talking, you guys do that as well. So kind of used to it, but if you, whatever. Y'all watch those videos. Make sure that you do your work. All right, don't slack. Don't take it for granted. Don't just go halfway. All right, this is different. This is something new. I'll have to adjust to it. You guys will have to adjust to it, and we're going to be able to be just fine. All right. So anyway, that's intro. Chapter 16 is where we're at. All right, and chapter 16 is all about attempts at liberty, and we're going to focus in on two different countries. We're going to focus on America. And we're going to focus on France. And both these countries have revolutions, right? Or we would say, political changes or whatever. At about the same time, we're a little bit ahead of them. Theirs is a little bit more involved as far as years than we are. But about the same time, about the same as far as ideas of radically overthrowing the government or changing the government even by force. There are some similarities, but what we're going to try to focus on, what you guys are going to have to get to, is the fact that these are two very different outcomes. The French Revolution compared to the American Revolution are very different in their product as far as what they produce. And you can see on page 339, top of the page, talk about Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson once said, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time." The idea is that God has given us both liberty and He has given us life. And they almost go hand in hand. They go together. And they really do they not? I mean, we as Christians, we as our human life or our human interaction, we have liberty to do what we want to do. Now, we don't have liberty to choose our consequences, or we don't have liberty to be able to get out of things a lot. But we do have liberty to do what we want to do. But as the Bible verse says, it says that should we live in sin, that grace may abound, right? Even though we have grace, we're living in the age of grace, we're living in the age of free choice, free will. Do we neglect that, or do we sin? And of course, that Bible verse says, God forbid. But that's what we look at there. And so what we're going to see is it's going to contrast between the American Revolution, French Revolution, their background. We're going to talk about the way it came about, and then the results from it. And of course, you guys know a lot more about the American Revolution than the French Revolution. But today, this lesson focuses on here 16.1, just the American Revolution. So let's dive on in. Right, first off, jumping into how people got to America. You see on page 339 there, the Pilgrims. Of course, you guys know that they're 1620 coming in on what ship was that they came in on? Yes, Mayflower, very nice. And Mayflower there, and before even they got off the Mayflower, right, they had to get a self-governing document. So the Mayflower Compact was their document of choice. And this Mayflower Compact set up government for them, for that Plymouth colony, set up governing, in fact, there. Then you talk about the amount of people that came over, and from 1620 on, and the multitudes of people that did from many different areas of the world. You have European nations of all kinds. You had people from Asia that came over also, and I mean it was quite the melting pot. That's what we call America, the melting pot. But Britain still had control of America, and you guys know that, but this is from the world history perspective. And so really you fast forward to the 1730s, 40s, even in the 1750s, and Britain had a very hands-off approach to America. They let America be free to do what they want to do. We had to pay some taxes and that sort of thing, but we were really kind of free to do what we wanted to do. Well, that all changed big time when the French and Indian War came about. We just got done talking about the French and Indian War, right? 7 Years' War in the European perspective. And after that war, things changed quite a bit because America fought the brunt of that war, and Britain wanted to be sure that America paid for the brunt of that war through taxes. And we saw that as quite a slap in the face, if you will, and we did not want that to be the case. So we started to rebel, we as being Americans, and wanted representation, right? We know that no taxation without representation. That was the big rallying cry, the big phrase. And the king at the time, King George III, he wanted none of it, right? We petitioned him several times, did America, to open up these taxes or at least give us representation. Let us be able to talk about these taxes. Let us be able to negotiate a little bit. George III wouldn't have anything to do with it. In fact, you guys know there he started to raise the taxes on us. The Intolerable Acts is what it was called. And you had taxes like taxes on tea and stamps and legal documents. And that's where you had the Boston Tea Party and whatever it might have been. And a lot of talks of revolution, of overthrowing the British overlords, and whether or not they were right, whether or not they were wrong. And there were some groups of people that were loyal to the British crown, right? The Tories or the Loyalists. There were revolutionists. Obviously, there were people that were in the middle. They said, hey, yeah, we don't really fans of what Britain's doing, but they are our government, and we've got to follow them. Yeah, excuse me. Well, the revolutionists end up winning out, right? And they decide that they're going to declare independence, right? Declaration of Independence. Hopefully you know that date, July 4th, 1776. We declare our independence from Britain. We don't automatically get it, though. We've got to fight for it. And so we do. We have the Revolutionary War is what it's called there, right? Or the War for Independence, or whatever it might have been. And we have that fight there. We fight through. We have a guy, George Washington. He is the main general for us as the American side. Well-loved, well-respected by everyone. He led the army. He was a vital part, if you remember, in the 7 Years' War as well. So got great experience there. He knew how to lead the troops. He was a familiar face to Americans because of that war, that fighting. And so the natural progression, he became the general of the troops. And at the beginning, the American War for Revolution American War for Independence was not going well for the American side. They were undermanned. They were untrained. They were equipped. I mean, and they were going up against one of the best, if not the best, fighting forces that the world knew at that time. So at the beginning, they were getting hammered. I mean, they were getting beat from all sides. It did not look good. Valley Forge, right, all that sort of thing there. But it did start to turn around about a year into the war, 1777, at a place called Saratoga. That was the turning point for the war. And the reason why was it was a big victory for the American side. Actually, a guy by the name of Benedict Arnold had a great hand in the Battle of Saratoga, which you wouldn't know him for winning for the American side. You know him for his traitor actions, but he did. But it was a turning point not only because of the win that we had. We secured some guns and ammunition and supplies, whatever. But the big thing was the fact that France decided that because of that win, they would join our cause. They would join our fight. They would fight with us. Partly because they were very salty from the 7 Years' War. Partly because they wanted to get their interests again back in the United States. And so they decided, hey, we're going to join the American side. So they do. And eventually, you fast forward 1781, at a place called Yorktown, a guy by the name of General Lord Cornwallis is forced to surrender to the Americans. And the war is over. Now, it's not until 2 years later that the Treaty of Paris comes out. And the Treaty of Paris, 1783, is what ended the War for Independence. Treaty of Paris, 1783, ended the War for Independence. Important date and note. But the reason for the fighting was not, and here's the big contrast here, page 343, you want to look in on this page and note it. The reason that America had fought for its independence was due to it wanting freedom. But its protest was not against government. Its protest was against government, and the reason being against the government that it had violated its own rules. Just like it says there, its protest was not against government as such. It wasn't against the government just because the government was there. It was because the government had broken its own rules. And they said, listen, because you broke your rules, we don't want to be a part of it anymore. We were just fine with the way that it was working before. You started changing things up. Because you started changing things up, we don't want it anymore. And that's why they got away from it. Well, they successfully win. Right? We talked about that before. They establish a republic, right? The Republic of the United States. They're a constitutional republic or a federal republic. A couple terms that you see on page 343. You see federalism. And federalism has to do with the separation of powers between the national and the state and the local government. Each three, right? All three of them. Right? You got the federal government, you got the state government, and you got the local government. Each three of those all three had different powers, different things that were reserved for them. Federal government could do certain things, the state government could do certain things, the local government could do certain things. That's what federalism is all about. It is all about divvying up or delegating powers to the national government and reserving all other powers for the state government or the people. Then we had one other big note there, the idea of popular sovereignty, that government is based on the consent of the governed. Another a big hit there. Well, when the Americans themselves were trying to establish their government, one of the big problems that they had was how to represent their people, how to have equal representation. Right? We created 2 houses of Congress. We created a Senate, which is 2 representatives per state. Each state gets 2. And then the House of Representatives is based on population. You guys, hopefully you know that, remember that. We'll talk about that next year in 11th grade. But that's how they set it up. But when they started to pass around a constitution, right, 1789, because, by the way, the first couple attempts, right, Articles of Confederation was a flop, right? It was an absolute disaster because it limited the central government so much that they couldn't get any work done, which I know you anti-governmentists are saying, yay, they couldn't get any work done. I know. But this was kind of a bad thing because, first off, they couldn't have an army. And if you can't have an army, you can't defend yourself. They also couldn't raise taxes. So there was no chance at generating revenue. So that was scrapped. That was out of there. 1789, they passed a constitution. Now, there was some arguments back and forth about the Constitution because it did not give enough freedoms to the people. And specifically, it did not protect the people from the government. So one of the big things that they tagged on with the Constitution was 10 amendments to it, or changes to it, or additions. And of course, you guys know the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are the Bill of Rights. And these 10 Bill of Rights amendments, they all had to do with protecting the people from the government. That was the big key. And these included right, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of petition of rights or of peaceful protest, freedom to keep and bear arms. It had to do with judicial proceedings and no quartering and housing. And it was freedoms, basically, the basic of it, to protect the people from the government. That was the big deal. All right. And they adopt this constitution, they get it rolling. And that's in France. That's in America. So that was the American Revolution. And from that point on, right, even to today, the rest is history, as they say, because America still is underneath their same exact government. Of course, we have changes to it, right? We have 27 amendments, 26 amendments in our Constitution, changes to our Constitution, which isn't bad for 240 some odd years of history. But, we still have the same government that we had before. Now, what we're going to see, though, next lesson, because that's all for that lesson there, is we're going to see in the French side of things. And the French side of things, they had a lot deeper problems in their government. And the big fundamental difference is, like I mentioned before, they didn't overthrow their government just because, America did not overthrow their government just because it was the government, they didn't like it. They overthrew their government because the government didn't do what they said they would do. You go and you flip side of the French Revolution, the French overthrow their government because they don't like their government. Not because the government did what they weren't supposed to, now they did. Okay, we'll talk about that. Gross misspending by their kings. They would spend it on all their lavishness and leave their people poor and all that sort of thing. Louis XIV really got that going. The 15th, his grandson weren't any better. The 16th, after me, the deluge, and on you go. But what we'll see is the French have a lot bigger set of problems, and it causes a huge set of problems when you're talking about trying to rebuild. And they have government after government after government. They have some stability with Napoleon Bonaparte, but then still they don't want a tyrant anymore. And it is a lot of change. We'll see that coming up next lesson.